I'm announcing that today we are filing a lawsuit against Donald Trump for violating the law as part of his efforts to generate profits for himself, his family, and his company.
New York Attorney General Letitia James announcing she's suing former President Trump and his company, looking to make sure he never does business in the state of New York again. Well, former assistant DA at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and Newsmax contributor Amir Benno and distinguished university professor at Touro University Thane Rosenbaum joins us as part of our legal panel to dig into this. Thane, I want to kick it off with you. The allegation that Trump overvalued his properties worth, like Mar-a-Lago, which was valued at $739 million. The AG saying it's only worth $75 million. What is your take?
Well, it's interesting, that disparity. And Kilmeny, you're smart enough to know that when it comes to real estate, it's very subjective, right? So when you're talking about fraud in the ruthless business of real estate, that's a very strange thing to say, that it's automatically fraud, because the valuations of properties are often subjective. The documents apparently in this instance said that they were unaudited. It doesn't appear to be that there is any victim of the crime. None of the banks or insurance companies are complaining. The New York Attorney General is complaining, but I guess everyone else made money on this deal. And so it's not clear. And let me just say one last thing, that I'm not sure this law that she's using is even constitutional, because it's a special law giving her statutory authority to bring fraud cases without evidence of intent or causation. And this has backfired on other New York attorney generals in the past. I think in the Exxon case, it blew up in Eliot Spitzer's face precisely for this thing, because it looks like it's retaliatory and political, and it doesn't really look it's like about fraud, because it doesn't require the showing of fraud that's otherwise necessary to make that case. And I think that again weakens the case in front of the AG.
Amir, how do you read all this?
Well, I agree I think Thane is right on point with all of this. And look, let's not forget, she has the power, Letitia James, as the Attorney General. She does have the power to bring criminal prosecutions. It's not just a civil office. She chose not to, and one has to wonder why. And look, the fact of the matter is that the Manhattan District Attorney's Office had impaneled a grand jury and had issued subpoenas and reviewed these financial documents over and over. They took a couple trips up to the Supreme Court in order to get them. And at the end of the day, two DAs, both Cyrus Vance and now Alvin Bragg, have not brought any charges against the Trump organization or Donald Trump based on these allegations. And so they haven't found anything there. So Letitia James is bringing a civil lawsuit that she knows is going to drag out interminably right before the election for political purposes, because she ran on taking down Donald Trump. And now she says she's going to refer the criminal side to the DOJ when she knows that there's nothing there for them to look at. It's a complete kabuki theater, a political partisanship, and it makes a mockery of our justice system. And that's shameful. And frankly, she should be disqualified from handling this case.
Gentlemen, I want to turn now to the latest when it comes to the FBI's raid of Mar-a-Lago. We know an appeals court is now granting the Justice Department access to the documents taken from Mar-a-Lago. Thane, what do you think that means for the former president?
You know, this ruling by the 11th Circuit is very limited, Kilmeny, right? All it really says is give the 100 classified documents back to the government and let them continue their investigation, right? There are no criminal charges that have been filed yet. I'm not convinced that they have it, right? And besides which, the special master, no matter what he ultimately rules, it still goes back to the federal judge Cannon. And she seemed to be much more sympathetic to something that I know Amir and I have been saying for a few weeks on Newsmax, which is you can't read these crimes, these purported crimes against the president without recognizing that he was the president, right? That the crimes that he allegedly committed, when they're normally applied, they're not applied to former presidents of the United States. They're applied to members of the press, private individuals, low-level government employees. The Presidential Records Act, it's a federal statute, Kilmeny, contemplates that the president will have some entitlement to take some of his stuff home. George Washington did, and so will other presidents. And so I'm not sure that unless they can show that he sold this, disseminated this, burned it up in a fire pit in Mar-a-Lago, the mere possession and retention, I'm not sure that it violates any of those statutes because they have to be read against the Presidential Records Act.
Amir, we've got about less than a minute. I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, so on this is I agree with Thane, it's a very limited holding. It applies to 100 documents that have classification markings, okay? That's not necessarily that they're classified. They're
point.
Markings. We saw some of these folders that had markings on them that were empty. Those fall into this category. And the question, what they pretty much said is, well, Judge Cannon, there was no finding that the government in executing this search warrant had shown callous disregard to Donald Trump's rights. And that to them was the end all. Beyond that, they didn't need to go any further. And so that issue really wasn't litigated or disputed that much before Judge Cannon. So I think the holding of the 11th Circuit's very limited. We're going to see what happens now with the special master. The biggest fight is going to be when this assertion of executive privilege and whether executive privilege does apply and whether the former president could assert it. That's going to be the biggest legal hurdle and the biggest legal argument to come. And I think we should stay tuned and see how that develops.
All right, gentlemen, it's a privilege to have your expertise on the program. Amir Benno, Thane Rosenbaum, thank you.
Thank you, Gilman.